To the point of Tyler Warren and like mock drafts and why he's being projected here so much, they run the third highest. They had the third highest 12 personnel usage in the NFL last season, and I think that if he's there, this could be for Chicago what Sam Laporta was for Detroit. And Sam Laporta was their third leading receiver last year, and he's been up there the last couple of years.
I want to ask you about Cole Kmet. All this smoke that we're hearing, Courtney, about the two tight ends that they may take now at 10, that they could be in play for Loveland, and they could be in play for the person that we've been talking about the entire Tyler Warren.
Tyler Warren.
Yeah, the entire offseason. Does this mean that they're down on Cole, or does this mean that they want to run a lot of 12 personnel? Does this mean that they could look to part with Cole Kmet? How do you read all the smoke that you're hearing about the tight end possibility at 10?
So a couple different things. Knowing that Cole doesn't have, I don't think there's any guaranteed money left on the contract. So that's, read into that what you will, but that is something that I think needs to be brought up. And additionally, what Ben Johnson's comments were about Cole Kmet at owners' meetings a couple of weeks ago, I thought there wasn't like overly glowy praise. Not that you expect that, but this is Ben Johnson's first time really to talk about these players that are on the roster, whether he's talking about DJ, whether he's talking about Rome, whether he's talking about, DeAndre Swift. I was a little surprised, just maybe it's me, that when he was asked, hey, how do you get Cole Kmet more involved in the offense? He said, I can't answer that question yet because I haven't been on the field with him. So we'll see what he can do. That was like, right. To me, it's a no-brainer. This is your blanket for a young quarterback, security blanket for a young quarterback in the red zone. Like, I'm pretty sure that Luke Getsy said the same thing when it was Justin Fields and Cole Kmet. So I was kind of surprised that Ben Johnson didn't have that same sort of assessment.
Right.
And,
Courtney, to that point, he said, I think he was more glowing about Braxton Jones than he was about Cole Kmet.
Yeah, when he said like Braxton can absolutely or definitely whatever the quantifier was, play left tackle in this offense. You're right about that, Sylvie. But to the point of Tyler Warren and like mock drafts and why he's being projected here so much, they run the third highest. They had the third highest 12 personnel usage in the NFL last season, and I think that if he's there, which in a lot of mocks he's still there at 10, this could be for Chicago what Sam Laporta was for Detroit. And Sam Laporta was their third leading receiver last year, and he's been up there the last couple of years. You need two tight ends in this offense if it's going to be what they ran in Detroit, and for a lot of reasons you think it will be, because there's two receivers. They don't really have it's not the same sort of depth chart that they were operating with in Chicago last year. And then you've got a tight end who's effectively your number 3. I think that will be Tyler Warren if he's there. Does it speak to maybe a transition for Cole Kmet and the type of role? Reading between the lines, you'd kind of think so, right? Just a new coach coming in maybe doesn't see what Cole Kmet's ceiling is this many years into his career as he would like a younger player. But I definitely was a little surprised when he's talking about Tyler Warren, and he did talk about him, I think, on CHGO's podcast, all the creative ways that you can use him, and just how he wasn't speaking about Cole Kmet in that same sort of manner.
What about the other tight end that's kind of floating in the Bears' orbit too, with Colston Loveland from Michigan? Do you have a temperature on how the Bears feel about him?
So I know that his name came up a couple times, recently, just with people asking about, wait, there's another tight end that's climbing up the board. I'll say this: if you're using a top 10 pick on a tight end, that guy better be a dog. And for all intents and purposes, that's what we think when we see Tyler Warren. All the great things that he did at Michigan. Didn't win it, but he was a finalist for the Heisman Trophy last year. 1,200 yards, 104 passes, 12 touchdowns. They go to the college football playoff. He blocks for 2,000-yard rushers. Not saying that Loveland can't do that, but I don't see Brock Bowers in either of them. But I do think that Tyler Warren is the better of the two. So it's like if you're using a top 10 pick on that position, that guy better be special. I don't know if the Michigan tight end would fall into that same category.
So did I hear you correctly where you said if Warren's there, you expect them to take him at 10? Is that what you said?
It depends how the board falls. So, like, we do our mock draft for NFL Nation. We've got a special on NFL Live that airs next week. So I had to go through the exercise of all the offensive tackles that I thought the Bears would be interested in were off the board. There were 3 taken before when the Bears got on the clock in this mock draft that I was doing.
Even Banks?
At 10.
Was Banks?
Even Banks.
Yeah.
Banks went, I believe, at 7 to the Jets, which is interesting because it just shows you when the Patriots pick an offensive tackle, that's when the run starts in the first round. Will Campbell goes, and then Armand Membo goes, and then Kelvin Banks goes. Do the Bears want to reach for a first-round tackle there, knowing that they've got 39 and 41 to potentially handle that? That's why I thought Warren. Like, I still am of the belief that if you're franchise left tackle, if the board falls to a place where you can get somebody in the building who maybe you don't need year one, and Phil and Dan Rauscher said it yesterday. Like, if Braxton was healthy today, he is the starting left tackle. That's how he views it. He's the offensive line coach. I think you take that for, to put a lot of stock into that. But I don't think that precludes you at that position from thinking about the future. So I would still go offensive line if you could, but if the best ones are gone and there's a gap between where you view some of the later first-round tackles and Tyler Warren's there, I don't think there's any harm in upgrading the receiving core, all of it around Caleb, by getting a versatile piece that you can, use create a lot of mismatches with and help the passing game grow.
What about with Ashton Genty? Like, if somehow both guys are on the board, or do you feel like there's a preference for one prospect over the other at 10?
It's hard to answer that question just because I think realistically both are not on the board at 10. Like, there's just no way that Genty, even if he got past the Raiders at 6, you think that the Saints at 9, I don't know if they're going quarterback or not. I think it's stupid to go quarterback, frankly, when you should be committing to a rebuild. But I think you'd probably prioritize, because of what these running backs were asked to do in Detroit between Montgomery and Gibbs. I think you prioritize the running back there. If you're trying to think of it, how Ben Johnson, if he had to choose one or the other, I think if both were there, which I don't expect both to be, but I think Genty would probably get the check mark from the Bears.
What is the status of a Thuney extension? They've been getting some work done here in the last week with 2 extensions on young players that they like in their defense. What about the acquisition of Thuney? And is this just a complicated negotiation? Do they want to wait to see him? What's going on there, Courtney?
Yeah, it's a fair question, because you saw 2 players get extended this week on one side of the ball, and guys that clearly factor into their longer-term plans. Thuney's 32. Is he the best guard in football right now? Sure. And that's the reason that they made that trade. But I'm not surprised that it's taking a little bit longer. I think the draft factors in here. Like, what if they get somebody that they, like Will Campbell, for example, or even, maybe somebody else. The only reason I bring up Campbell is because of the arms thing, and some people think he's a tackle, some people think he's a guard, whatever it is. If they get somebody that they get into their system and they can see how that person projects, and maybe they're thinking, hey, well, Thuney's 32, but we spent a high draft pick on this player, maybe we do view this person as a one-year rental. Like, I think there's still a lot to be determined in terms of, like, how long they expect him to play. I would imagine Joe Thuney's probably still going to play for a couple more years. He's had an all-pro back-to-back years. He doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon. You'd be hard-pressed to think that after another year of them, short-term rental with Keenan Allen for a 4th-round pick, and then they let him go. There was no contract extension done there wisely. I have a hard time thinking that they go that same route with Joe Thuney. But again, I think that the draft can dictate if they do see like a depth thing and maybe somebody that would be ready to take over one of those spots sooner rather than later, that maybe they'd want to hold off a little bit.
At what point with a Thuney extension or lack of a Thuney extension would you kind of be like, this may not be getting done?
Well, we don't see them do deals in season. That's always kind of interesting, just because, like, if it's not done by the start of training camp, or early on in training camp, that typically, at least with this front office, it hasn't gotten done. I don't think that means that it's a deal breaker, but they've had no qualms about letting guys, hit free agency and like go through the year without getting a deal done. So I still think there's a lot of time. I think it's way too early to tell on the Thuney thing, but typically I was a little surprised just the timing of, I think it's smart, but the timing of Kyler Gordon and TJ Edwards getting done as early as they did, because they haven't extended players since, earlier than when they did Cole and DJ Moore in July the last couple of years.
So are you a huge Randall L fan because of the connection too with your school?
It's so cool. Like hearing him talk about, obviously, being from the air, like, from out south and going to Indiana, like people forget, or maybe people don't, but I thought it was fun, him getting pressed yesterday by, media members. Are you the best basketball player in the building? He played basketball at Indiana. Are you the best baseball player in the building? And he said, no, without question, he's still the best baseball player. He wasn't sure. He said he couldn't hit a jump shot. I guess, he's kind of lost his mark. I mean, there's some correlations to the basketball team in town that I think, he could resonate with. But no, I mean, it's really cool. Like, I can't wait to like geek out over Indiana football with him at some point. And he's got a great personality.
Yes.
Like just hearing him at the podium yesterday, you can tell there's a reason he's got that assistant head coach title associated with him for a lot of different reasons. Like, and hearing him talk about that yesterday in like the smaller group setting about, I've got to be ready at any time. If I was called upon to do that, and he does have aspirations of being a head coach, you can see it. Even in just like a few conversations you have, he's got a magnetic personality and he's walked the walk. I think, for anybody that, like, when you take a look at DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, the guys that are going to benefit from having somebody who won a Super Bowl, has coached in one, and, has been part of this, guys like that resonate with players. And I think Ben Johnson has done a pretty strategic job of bringing on former players who have a way with the current players, because they can show them how it was done and that they went through the same process. And, how magnetic his personality was. Obviously, you're not surprised because he's a Hoosier, and that's just how people from my alma mater are. Yeah. But it's cool. Like, it's cool. I've never actually, outside of Dan Feeney, I've never covered anybody in the NFL that played for Indiana. So it's going to be fun. I can't wait. He's probably going to be sick of me by the time this thing is over, because every week in season, I'm going to end up bringing up something in a press conference about how IU played.
That's awesome. So do you believe, though, that he's exactly what that wide receiver room needs? Because he can be tough, but he can also, it seems like, be their best friend and is really good at developing receivers.
Yeah, and I think for, DJ and Rome need different things. DJ's, 7-8 years into this? He's 28 years old. He was a first-round pick in 18. Like, I think for him, it's fine tuning. And, Randall L played about the same amount of time, like almost a decade. I think he was in with Pittsburgh in Washington for 8 years total. Like, I think for a guy like DJ, what do you figure is your next step? Like, that's got to be hard, because when your baseline is as good as his is, you can kind of go half speed on things. And I think that can be a pattern that guys fall into. I think having somebody like Randall L be able to press him on, I want to get you to a spot where you are on a team that's winning, because DJ's never been on a team that's winning, and what his level of play needs to be like so the team can actually win games, like, and consistently win games and get to double-digit wins for the first time in his career. That's something he doesn't know yet. Having somebody who's done that, walk the walk again, like using that same analogy, I think is going to be critical for DJ. But more than anything, Rome is in a critical spot. 2 years in, I remember when I was covering Minnesota and Justin Jefferson was going into his second year, they made some changes on the coaching staff, and they brought in Keenan McCardle who obviously had a great career in Jacksonville, but they realized you can't just, when you have a thoroughbred, you can't just have anybody coaching that player. You need somebody who has done it and somebody who knows the intricacies of the position unlike anybody else. So I think this is going to be, more than anybody, if you're asking me who benefits more, I think it's Rome, because of where he's at in his career and trying to make the jump now 2 years in. to a level that we have not, like, when they kind of cut the leash off him at some point, we'll see how good he can be. And that development factor and the teaching element is going to be huge for Antoine Randall out with him.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that, and I'm very excited to see, just the way you put it, to get what each guy needs. Courtney, great stuff. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you on draft night probably.
Sounds great. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.